Hey everyone, my name is Nofar Eliya, and I'm a student at the Educational Neuroimaging Center under the supervision of Dr. Tzipi Horowitz-Kraus. And today I'm going to talk about my study. My study is about the relations between parental reading ability and the involvement of executive functions in reading in their children. So let's begin. So what we are going to talk about today, we will start at the introduction, parental reading ability, what is it, executive functions, reading ability, and then we will continue to my aims and hypotheses, materials and methods, and the results, discussion, and the final conclusion. So let's continue. So let's begin and talk about the introduction in my study. So for all of us to be on the same page, let's review the acronyms that you can see during my work. EFs are executive functions, RDs, reading difficulties, RM ANOVA, repeated measures, analysis of variance, SOP, speed of processing, and WM, working memory. Let's continue. So let's talk about parental reading ability. Children who purchase the reading ability by guided through the reading process by their parents learn more strategies like advanced vocabulary, linguistics, and etc. So parents that are more involved, the children can achieve early literacy development. Therefore, it doesn't really come by surprise that if the parents have an RD, the child will be at a higher risk to develop RD themselves. So in my last slide, I said that parents with RD, their children are at higher risk to develop an RD. But why is that? What the connections between those two? So in the literature, we saw a study that found a positive association between parents with RD and lower home literacy environment. Okay, sounds correct, but what else? So another reason shown that parents with RD expose their children to a fewer shared reading activities compared to parents with no RD. So, okay, let's think about it for a moment. If I have an RD, reading difficulties, means that reading is not coming so easily to me. So why I will do it with my child? I will probably prefer to do something else. And if I will do something else with him, means that the child exposed to lower literacy environment. And if exposed to less books and less literacy environment and less shared reading activities, it's not come by surprise that they will find a connection between parents with RD and children with RD. So a few slides ago, I said that my work is also about executive functions. But what is it, executive functions, exactly? Executive functions and attentions are two components under the umbrella term of attention network. And what is the attention network? The attention network models include both bottom-up abilities, like alerting and orienting, and a higher order top-down abilities, like executive functions. So what's the core of the executive functions? The core are working memory, inhibition, and cognitive flexibility. Every one of them, we will say more about it in my next slide. So now I'm going to talk about the core executive functions. What are these? So the first one is working memory. It's a crucial part of performance and learning. It refers to a temporary storage in the brain. The second is inhibition. It's mental process, and it helps us to control of thoughts and actions. The third is cognitive flexibility. It helps us to shift between conflicting stimuli, like flexible adjustments to new rules or requirements. And the fourth is speed of processing. It's the total time that takes for comprehending and responding to a new stimuli from the moment it was received. So what is the relationship between executive functions and reading ability? The core executive functions that reading relies on are inhibition, working memory, and speed of processing. Actually, a study by Tzipi, Horowitz-Kraus found that fluent reading relies on executive function. So, children with reading difficulties experience deficits in executive functions. And in my study, we are going to talk a little bit about this connection exactly. So until now in my presentation, I said a few times the words reading ability. But what is reading ability exactly? Reading is a cognitive ability which allows to translate written abstract shapes or letters to sounds and words in the spoken language. So you can see some shapes on the paper and you know how to read it, like newspaper, books, signs on the road, and etc. However, this ability is not intuitive. I probably doesn't know exactly how it was not to know how to read, right? But it wasn't something that you're born with. It's something that you achieved. It's not like spoken language that you knew pretty good at the age of 4. It's something that you need really like to put energy on. It involves phonological processing, visual abilities, and cognitive controls. All of these are needed to achieve a fluent reading ability. So in my last slide, I said that reading is not so intuitive as we all thought. So I added to this slide something really nice, and you can see that at the beginning it's a little bit hard, but as you go it's going to be a little bit easier. So try this. Stop for a moment this video and try to do it. So we talked about the introduction, parental reading ability, executive functions, and reading. And now we can go on to the aims and the hypotheses of the study. So the aims of this study are: Aim 1, to determine the relationship in a longitudinal study between changes in EF and the child reading ability, term 1 and term 2. Aim 2, to determine the relationship between children EF's ability pre-reading and child reading ability. Aims 3, to determine the relationship between child's EF's pre-reading age and parental reading ability. And aims 4 is to answer this question: are EF's ability, pre-reading equation, and association with parental reading ability can predicted reading ability? So let's talk about our hypotheses. The first one, changes in executive functions, time point 2 minus time point 1, along development will be related to child reading abilities. The second, EF's pre-reading age will be associated to child reading ability. The third, child's executive functions at pre-reading age will be related to parental reading ability. And 4, executive functions pre-reading age will predict reading abilities mediated by parental reading. So, the better executive function the child have and the better reading ability that the parents have, the better reading ability we'll think that the child will have. Okay? So executive functions, parental reading, and the reading ability of the child. So we finished until here the introductions and reading and aims and hypotheses, and now we are at the materials and methods. So let's talk about them. So now I'm going to talk about the participants in this study. This study is a longitudinal study, and the participants were 16 children, 6 boys and 10 girls from Naamat cohort, Naamat daycare in the Technium. The first time point were at the ages of 4 until 6 years old, at pre-reading age, time point 1, and the second time point at the ages 6 until 8 years old, at reading age. All our participants were native Hebrew speakers. So now we are going to talk about the behavioral measures. As you can see, there are 3 columns. The first one, executive functions measures. This test took place 2 times. The first time, it when the child was at pre-reading age, and the second time, it was when the child was at reading age. All these tests are here to evaluated to the executive functions ability at the child. So, for example, digits forward, here the child needs to repeat a few numbers that will tell him, like 1, 3, 4. And the child needs to repeat it and to say 1, 3, 4. This measure and working memory. Remember, we talked about the core EFs a few slides ago. The second column, reading measures. Reading measures took place only at time point 2, only when the child knows how to read. In here you can see tests like single word. The child needs to read a few words. Second test, it's phonological decoding. In here, the child see, we said something like funny words. It's non-words. And the third one is oral reading. In here, the child he gets a text that he needs to read all of it, read aloud. And the third column is parental reading ability. In here, the parents came to the lab and we want to assess their reading ability. So, as you can see, the first one is single word, like the test that the child did, but for adults, of course. Single non-words, it's the phonological, and read aloud. So, let's continue to aim number 3. In here, we want to investigate the relations between child executive functions at pre-reading age and parental reading ability. So, we took Pearson and Spearman correlations, and normality was assessed based on weak Shapiro. So, Pearson correlations were reported when both correlation variables had normal, and if not, we took the Spearman correlation. Aim 4. Here we want to predict child reading ability using the change in child executive abilities. What is the change? The change is time point 2 minus time point 1. Reading stage minus pre-reading stage. Controlling for the child interest mediated by the parent's reading ability. A mediation analysis. We will talk about it more at the results part. So just to be sure that everyone knows where we are at, we did the introductions, the aims, the hypothesis, the materials and methods, and now we're at the results, the fun part. So we talked about how we analyze the data. So let's see what we got, the results part, the fun part. So we are at our first result, speed of processing measured by naming colors and naming objects. The change between those two, time point 2 and time point 1, were significantly correlated with reading equation. So the change between those two can demonstrate a better reading ability. So now we are going to talk about the second result, the relations between child executive functions, and here at speed of processing we used the coding tests and pre-reading age and child reading ability, and we used to measure it the oral reading. We found a positive correlation, and this result can suggest that a higher speed of processing can relate it to better child reading ability at reading age. So now I'm going to talk about our third result, the relations between child executive functions. And here we used the coding tests at pre-reading age, and parental reading ability we used a non-words test, and as you can see there is a positive correlation. This result can suggest that the better reading ability that the parents have, the better executive functions you can see at the child. So we are at our final result, mediation analysis. In here we took the executive functions ability of the child. This is going to be our predictor. And the parental reading ability. This is going to be our mediator. And we want to know how those two can predict the child reading ability. So, the parent reading ability, we measured it using the phonological decoding. It's the non-word tests. And the executive functions at the child, we used the speed of processing. We measured it using the coding test. And the reading ability at the child, we measured it using the child oral reading ability. The total effect of speed of processing on child reading ability was significant. And the indirect effect of speed of processing on child reading ability via parental reading ability was also significant. So, if all of this is significant, it means that you can use the executive functions of the child and the parental reading of the parents to predict the child reading ability. So we went through most of this presentation. We did the introduction and the aims and the hypothesis and the materials and methods. We went through all the results, and now we want some explain about the results, what we get and why is that. So the discussion part. So now we can begin with the discussion part. So what did we see at the results part? The results showed that higher executive functions at pre-reading age, at time point 1, were related to higher child reading scores, especially at the speed of processing, the one of the cores of executive functions. Furthermore, speed of processing at pre-reading age predicted the child reading ability mediated by parental reading abilities that we saw at the mediation part. So, if we take these results, this can highlight the role of executive function, especially speed of processing in reading acquisition. But also the parents have a part. Parents reading is also crucial in the child reading development, which might be attributed to both environmental and genetic factors in the child. So, we nearly finished this presentation. We went through the introductions and the aims and the hypotheses and the materials and methods and the results and also the discussion, and now we are at the conclusion part. So let's summarize all the results from this study, the conclusion part. So after you heard everything in my presentations and the results part, let's summarize everything together in the conclusion. Our results demonstrate the association between executive functions, especially the speed of processing, and reading acquisitions. These findings support our hypothesis of the association between reading ability in the parents and the development of executive functions and reading ability in the child. So we nearly finished this presentation, but I really needed to say a few things before I can end this presentation. So first of all, thank you for all of my colleagues in the lab. Thank you for being there for me and to help and to assist. And of course to Michal and Rola that always can answer every question that we have. And the biggest thank you is for Dr. Tzipi Horowitz-Kraus that without her I wasn't being here today. So thank you so much. So we finished my presentation. I hope it was an interesting talk, and for me it was an interesting subject to work on. If any of you have a question or something you want to clarify, you can come and join to the seminar faculty. Thank you so much for listening, and that's it. Have a good day.